So here we go with the number crunching. So the total costs, looking at purchasing, going back up here, purchasing was $400,000. All right, that was the total cost of having a purchasing department. It's all the salaries and basically all the costs associated with having that purchasing department. All right, so the theme park division, it looks like they made 25,000 purchase requisitions, whereas the movie park division only made 15,000. So the idea here would be that you would have $400,000 was the total cost over 40,000 total purchase requisitions, giving you $10 for each purchase requisition. So what you do there is for each one then you're going to allocate $10 of cost. Oops. So they don't take you to the next step here, the next logical step, but it would be $10 for each purchase requisitions. That would be $10 times 25,000 requisitions for the theme park division, meaning that they would bear $250,000 of the cost. Or the movie production division would be 15,000 purchase requisitions at $10 a requisition. They would bear $150,000 of the cost. So there you go. There's your $400,000 allocated between the two departments. Now payroll, looks like theme park, they have a lot more people working there than they do in the movies. So what it is the total cost of having a payroll department was $255,000. You cut 15,000 payroll checks. So for each check, that's $17 per payroll check. So you would take that $17 per check times 12,000 employees, or rather not 12,000 employees, but 12,000 payroll checks, and whatever that would come out to, sorry, I can't do 12,000 times 17 in my head, but whatever that would come out to would be the cost to the theme park division of sharing that service of having a shared payroll. And the movie production division would be 3,000 payroll checks at $17 a check. All right, and they would bear that cost. And the last one would be, as we said before, is legal. Theme park division needed 100 hours, movie division needed 900 hours. In total, there were 1,000 hours billed from the legal division. Well, the total cost of having that legal department on hand is $250,000 over 1,000 hours. So this basically equates to $250 an hour. So the theme park division's 100 hours at $250 an hour, and the movie production division's 900 hours at $250 an hour. And that's going to break down and give you a separation of that costs of that $250,000. Okay, so what that looks like now is here. Here's all of the answers. And they give you the breakdown as well, all of the things I was saying. So just to go back to the legal one, 100 hours at $250 an hour is 25,000. There you go. There's 25,000 going to theme park. You've got 900 hours at $250 an hour going to the movie production division. So there's those costs as well. Okay, so this is just a summary of everything I just talked about. Okay, we're going to skip that. All right. The way you're going to evaluate a profit center manager is going to be how much income did they have? What did they make? What is their net income? Since they're in charge of, revenues as well as expenses, how much revenue, or rather how much income they have at the end of it should be a big basis in how they're performing. And as well as that, as you see here, you should be comparing the manager's performance to a budget. You can't just say you should make this much money. There should be a budgeted amount of money, so that this way it is reasonable. Okay. So now what we're going to talk about investment centers. Not only now we're going higher up the chain here. An investment center manager has a responsibility to do costs, revenues, but then also to decide where the money they make is going to go and how it's going to be invested in the company's future. Okay, to show you how this is going to work, we're going to look at a company called DataLink here. And you've got their revenues, their expenses, and their service department charges and income from operations. So here's the money that they're making. They made $70,000 at the end of it, $84,000 and $75,000. So what we're saying here is now that you are an investment manager, it's an investment center, you have the responsibility not only of these revenues and these expenses, but you have the responsibility of deciding where that $70,000, $84,000, and $75,000 goes. What are you going to do with the money now that you've made it? Well, one measure that we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at the rate of return on investment. This is going to be how we decide where we're going to invest that money. We're going to look at ROI, or return on assets. You could also, rate of return on investment or rate of return on assets. So the calculation's easily derived enough here. It's income from operations over the invested assets. So we're going to look at here is we're going to say, all right, the Northern Division, where you'd have to be told this information. You couldn't derive this information from the income statement. But you'd say the Northern Division has $350,000 of assets, Central Division has $700,000, and the Southern Division has $500,000. And what we look at here is ROI is calculated as, you could use really two formulas multiplied by each other to come up with ROI. Really, you could cancel these out as well, sales over sales, and that's where you have the income from operations over invested assets. But you can also get this information as well as this information. These are two separate analysis tools. Is looking at a profit margin and investment turnover. We did look at these way back in the beginning of this class. All right, but you're looking at income from operations over invested assets give you this ROI. But if you have the profit margin and you have the investment turnover, you can multiply the two of these times each other, and you would also come up with the same result. So the idea here is, well, here's a little summary, right? What profit margin, investment turnover mean, and you can look at those on your own. What we look at here is we're saying, all right, well, they had $70,000 was, we're looking at the Northern Division here, where they had $70,000 was the income from operations. Sales was $560,000 in each case, right? You can really cross these out and not worry about it. And your invested assets, you're told, is $350,000. So the idea here is, how well are you using those assets? The return on investment is really how well are you using those assets in order to return income. And what the calculation comes out to be is your return on investment is 20%. All right. Now that's all well and good, but as we talked about in the financial analysis chapters, is that you can't really just say 20% is good or bad. You're looking at that in a bubble. You need to look at that in comparison to maybe a budgeted number or how you were last year. You need to look at it in comparison with something else. Okay, so looking at the Central Division here, you have the $84,000, which was their income. Sales was $672,000, and the invested assets, you were told, was $700,000. Well, their return on investment is only 12%. Now that's a little concerning. What that kind of tells me is that they're not using their assets as well as the Northern Division are. The Northern Division's rate of return on investments is 20% versus their 12%. So the return is much lower for Central Division, meaning that they're not using their assets quite as well. And the Southern Division, here we go, using the same information, your return on investment is 15%. So you've got 20, 12, and 15. All right, Northern Division's much more efficient than Central and Southern, but Southern's even worse than Central. Or no, rather, I'm sorry, say that the other way. Central is even worse than Southern. There we go. So it's something that you'd want to look at. You'd want to look at what is the North doing that they're using their assets so much better than the Central or South divisions are. Okay, so let's say we're looking at the Northern Division and we're trying to decide whether or not we should add some additional advertising. The question is what is before we spend the money, because that's the point of this, is we're saying not only are we in charge of revenues and expenses, but we're in charge of what money we spend, the end money, what do we do with the income that we're making? Well, we have to look at an investment and decide if it's going to give us enough of a return to make sense to spend the money. So in this case, we are looking at spending $385,000 in advertising dollars. All right. And we think by spending $385,000 in advertising dollars that we are going to have an increase in $56,000 worth of revenues. And we're trying to decide whether or not it's worth it to make that investment. So what we would do here is we're saying it would have a $56,000 increase in revenue. So what we're doing is we're going to project what the change will look like. So we had $560,000, we're adding $56,000. It looks like our new income is going to be $616,000. Our operating expenses are going to be $385,000 now. I'm sorry, I was saying advertising here was going to be $385,000, but it's not advertising. It's the operating expenses are going to be increased, such as advertising, to $385,000. So they don't tell you what the advertising cost is by itself. They're saying overall $385,000 is going to be your operating expenses now. And what you're looking at is you're looking at income from operations before service department charges. There's your service department charges, which you don't have too much control over. And what we're looking at here is now our income from operations is going to be $77,000. That is a $7,000 increase from the income from operations before we were anticipating the additional cost of the advertising. So now the question is it worth it to make this investment? Is that 7% worth it? Well, what we do is we're saying we'd look at the return on investment. Is it worth that investment, that additional cost for those advertising dollars? So we'd run the new numbers, our projected numbers, 77,000 over 350,000, and it looks like our return on investment would actually be 22%. It is higher now than it was before we spent the extra money on advertising. If that's the case, I would say definitely spend the money on the additional advertising because our investment, it returns on the investment that much higher.